Around 10% of the Earth's surface is covered by forests. They play an important role in the planet's biosphere by retaining water, preserving soil quality, and providing habitat for an array of plant and animal life. Forests are also carbon sinks. By taking carbon dioxide from the atmosphere, they contribute to climate stability. With widespread deforestation, this is changing. 1/5 of the Earth's tropical forests were felled between 1960 and 1990. And some estimates say that 30% of the man-made increase in atmospheric levels of CO2 is due to the loss of forest. The world's forests are dwindling from the pressures of increasing human population. During the 16th and 17th centuries, Europe lost much of its old woodlands because of the demands of shipbuilding. Today, unsustainable logging and slash-and-burn agriculture continue to erode the Earth's great forests. Forests are a vital part of the planetary biosphere. The single most important step humanity can take to minimise the effects of climate change is to preserve the areas of forest that still remain. In southern Sri Lanka, the Sinharaja rainforest has been listed as a World Heritage Area. The 12,000 hectares of protected rainforest is home to a range of species found nowhere else. Strict enforcement of laws protecting Sinharaja has stopped illegal logging and informal cultivation in and around the forest. But changing weather patterns mean that rainfall has become inconsistent, and when it rains more heavily than before, triggering landslides. During the dry season, temperatures are consistently exceeding the old average, and the forest dries out. The effects on the forest are starting to show, with important trees like the kittul and the nar dying back. Once common species, these trees are becoming scarce as the region dries out. At the western corner of Brazil's Amazon, it's not just the forest that is under threat, but the traditional inhabitants as well. Previously, the isolated Ashaninka Indians had used violence to resist the pressure of miners and loggers from the outside world. Living on the margins of the Ammonia River for the past 400 years, the Ashaninka are one of the largest indigenous groups of the Amazon that have managed to maintain their traditions. Today, the Ashaninka are using education to preserve their culture and lands. They have established their own school dedicated to preserving the Ashaninka culture and fostering the spread of environmental awareness. Through environmental projects and the production of traditional food, this tribe is offering aid to other indigenous groups, taking part in their new school for people of the forest. It is the first school to be designed by the Indians themselves. The regular classrooms have lost their place to a more dynamic structure, as students spend part of the day out in the open. The idea of building a school came from the tribe's leader, Benki Pianco. The school's objective is to provide Amazonian residents with knowledge that will enable them to make a living without harming the environment. The Ashaninka school is not limited to Indians. It takes in loggers, rubber tappers, and even researchers who want to gain or exchange knowledge with the local people. The emphasis here is on integrating knowledge of the forest with practical skills. Students will leave knowing how to make a living and how to keep the forest living. The Accra state government has made Francisco Pianco, Benki's brother, Secretary for Indigenous People in an effort to push forward similar projects. Over 20% of the Amazon, the world's largest tropical forest, has already been destroyed. The Thai Forest National Park in the Ivory Coast is the largest remnant of a primary rainforest that once spanned 5 countries. Gebegebe Kale runs a conservation project for the World Wildlife Fund. He has set up a program to educate children about their environment. But loggers are hard at work on the fringes of the park. They have government permits to work there, provided they don't operate in the national park itself. Since the 1960s, the forest has been steadily destroyed, cut down for timber and cleared for farmland. Timber is big business in West Africa, and it's one of the Ivory Coast's most lucrative exports. The giant hardwood logs are trucked to the port of St. Pedro, and a tight permit system prevents the movement of illegally harvested lumber. Chimpanzees live in the rainforest, but it's rapidly shrinking, and there are only 1,500 left. The chimpanzees are hunted for bushmeat. This meat is said to come from neighbouring Liberia. The park's rangers are out to stop poachers, but the tracking process can take a week in deep forest, and though poaching in the national park has been reduced, the bushmeat trade still thrives. Gebegbi Kale is working hard to save the Ivory Coast's last ecological treasure. He wants the next generation to understand the significance of the forest. On regular field trips, he explains how long the trees take to grow to maturity. Kale's dream is to change perceptions so that people can understand the value of a living forest that's there forever. The future of the forest and its wildlife depends largely on the attitude of the people who live around it. Kale believes children are the forest's future. One of these forest giants can live for centuries, with branches stretching to a height of 60 metres. Kakamega Forest National Reserve is Kenya's only tropical rainforest. It is a remnant of a prehistoric forest that stretched from West Africa to the Rift Valley. Like other rainforests, it is rich in different plant and animal species, and like other rainforests, it is under pressure. The communities that live on the edges of the forest have one of the highest rates of population growth in the world. These people use Kakamega as a source of firewood and even for medicinal plants. The mondia plant is said to reduce blood pressure, to relieve allergies, to stimulate appetite, and even to act as an aphrodisiac. So popular is the mondia plant that it is in danger of being wiped out. All parts of the plant are useful, but it is the root that is most prized. Plants growing wild in the forest are becoming scarce. Rael Mosa used to dig for mondia in the forest, but for the past 2 years she's been growing it in her small field. The leaves and the seed pods have a cash value, and already she is making more from her mondia plants than she did from the maize that she previously cultivated. It will be another year before she is able to start harvesting mondia roots. ICEPI, an international ecological research institute, together with Kefri, a local partner, will buy the mondia from the community and package it for sale overseas. The local community has always known the healing properties of the mondia plant. Soon it will become available internationally. Rael is one of the first commercial cultivators of mondia. Not only does this help protect the rainforest, it is giving the community an increased income that is sustainable. But not everyone in the area has land, so the wild growing plant is still vulnerable. Although it's illegal, these young men continue to dig for the mondia root in the forest. This practice disturbs the ecological balance in the park. Illegally harvested mondia root is sold openly in Kakamega Market and is a very popular product. The threat to the forest will not ease until the high rate of unemployment is reduced. But black market mondia is becoming more difficult to find, and the illegal trade in the medicinal root is diminishing as native growing mondia disappears from the Kakamega forest. Toward the centre of Africa, in the Congo, the Upulu Reserve covers almost 14,000 square kilometres. Twice daily, park employees harvest leaves as feed in a captive breeding program. But it's not a safe job. For more than 10 years, the area has suffered through civil war, and before that, the park was violated by poachers hunting elephants for the ivory trade. The Upulu is the last remaining wild habitat of the okapi, a distant relative of the giraffe. The harvested leaves are washed and then hung for the okapis to eat. Okapis are solitary animals that forage along well-worn paths through the forest. They prefer large, secluded areas, and their need to move over a wide territory has led to problems with the okapi population because of a diminishing habitat. Now, the park and the okapis face a new threat. Thousands of people involved in illegal mining operations have invaded the Upulu, and park officials have appealed to rebel leaders to train and arm rangers to patrol the park. But with less than 60 trained guards to protect the massive area of the park reserve, there is still little that the Wildlife Authority in Upulu can do to stop the miners. The patrols have met with some success, but more often they come across areas that have been exploited by informal mining operations after the miners have moved on.
We consider this like...
The miners are digging for coltan, a mineral rich in tantalite, which is widely used in the electronics industry. This deserted camp has dead and dying trees and shows signs of native animals killed for food. 500 miners worked here, panning frantically for coltan in the nearby forest streams. They cut down trees for houses, destroyed the streams, and tore off tree bark to sieve the coltan from the water. Further on, the patrol finds a group of miners quietly at work. These are local subsistence farmers, hoping for quick riches. Typically, they are paid only a fraction of the mineral's true worth. The people funding such operations are rarely caught. Their equipment is confiscated, and they are led off to trial at the Wildlife Reserve headquarters. Again, economic hardship pushes people to make a living in any way they can, and some individuals have been convicted of the same offence a number of times. Back at Upulu Base, rangers show confiscated weapons and ivory. Between 10 and 20,000 okapis remain in the wild. Though they are not endangered, they are regarded as under threat from poaching and habitat destruction. The captive breeding program at Upulu receives support from UNESCO, the Frankfurt Zoo, and the Wildlife Conservation Society. Further east, in the Virunga National Park, is a small population of mountain gorillas. There are only 700 of these creatures left in the wild, so it came as a shock when it was discovered that 15 square kilometres of mountain gorilla habitat had been cleared in the Congo region of Virunga National Park. Mountain gorillas are reclusive animals which live in family groups. They are one of the very few tourist draws in the war-torn area and generate an estimated $2 million annually for the region. Rebel groups have used the gorilla's forest home as a base for incursions into Uganda, Rwanda, and the Congo. Despite more than 10 years of conflict in the region, the population of mountain gorillas has increased by 17% since 1989, and their habitat has largely been protected throughout this period. In all of Virunga, there are only about 425 square kilometres of suitable gorilla habitat, and the loss of even 15 square kilometres is huge. Settlers have illegally cleared the forest, which is a World Heritage Site. Destruction on this scale is organised and takes advantage of long-standing tensions in the border area. A fence has been built and armed guards defend the newly cleared land. Countries like the Congo and Rwanda do not have the resources to effectively patrol the park. Even though the gorillas are a huge income generator, the money they bring in is not being distributed evenly, and those who miss out are trying to make a living through what they see as undeveloped land. The Sima Biodiversity Conservation Area in Cambodia's Mondulkiri province teems with wildlife. In a cruel irony, the area has been protected from agricultural development by war. The Ho Chi Minh Trail, a vital supply line during the Vietnam War, passed through this part of Cambodia and was heavily bombed by American warplanes. 40 years later, the area has largely recovered. Now the Wildlife Conservation Society is attempting to see just what animals are living in the area. These relatively simple cameras have a sensor that triggers the shutter as soon as it registers movement. The cameras are fixed to trees and left for a month. The cameras have been in operation in the forest since 2002, but recently the data collection exercise has been targeted on the tiger population. As few as 5,000 tigers survive in the wild, down from some 100,000 a century ago. But the cameras will photograph anything that moves, like this leopard or this sun bear following a scent trail. This Asian elephant was caught digging a mud hole in the small pond they had hoped would attract a tiger. And this Southeast Asian gar is a type of wild cow, also at a waterhole. The black-shanked duok is a primate previously thought to live only in Vietnam. According to the WCS, at least 42 threatened species are thriving within the Sima biodiversity area. Evidence like these elephant tracks are common. In March 1970, 48 American bombers under secret orders crossed into neutral Cambodian airspace. It was the first of more than 3,000 missions that dropped 100,000 tons of bombs on eastern Cambodia. Bomb craters are still visible in the forests of Mondulkiri province, though the trees are closing over the scars of war. One of Cambodia's ethnic minorities, the Penong, live in the area. They rely on the forest and are committed to the protection of the conservation area, which is under threat from wildlife poachers and illegal loggers. This region's proximity to the border with Vietnam has made it vulnerable to cross-border raiders wanting to make easy gains from the forest. To counter them, armed Cambodian police run checkpoints and patrols right up to the Vietnamese border. Arrests are commonplace, but so far there have been only small-scale violations. Even so, the police have an extensive collection of confiscated weapons, such as homemade crossbows used to hunt tiger for black market aphrodisiacs. The police have also seized chainsaws, snares, and even log-carrying vehicles. After a month, the forest cameras are collected. They still use 35mm film because the simple technology is reliable and works well with the local infrastructure. The film is taken to Phnom Penh for processing and analysis. Skilled observers can recognise individual animals. Not only are they able to register the diversity of creatures in the area, they are able to calculate population densities. The zoologists are excited when they see young animals because they indicate a healthy and expanding population. Mondulkiri is a remote and little developed province in Cambodia. Its small population and the fact that only one major road connects it to the rest of the country have tended to protect the area from unsustainable practices. Extra population pressure could cause subsistence activities to expand to industrial levels, with unique flora and fauna being lost. Just 30 years ago, there were only 200 golden lion tamarins left in the world. thanks to some hard work by international conservation organisation the World Wildlife Fund, a recent birth has brought that number up to 1,000. The WWF has been involved in a desperate bid to save the tamarin and its Atlantic forest habitat. In the early 1970s, due to habitat destruction and because tamarins were popular as pets, there were only a few hundred left. Animals that once were pets are fitted with tracking collars before being returned to the forest. This means they can be monitored to make certain they are readjusting to an independent life. Increasing the populations of animals on the verge of extinction isn't easy. To save the golden lion tamarin, they need to save the forests that it lives in. And they are only found in the Atlantic forest in Brazil's Rio de Janeiro state. Along the coast, the forest has been lost to urban development. Further inland, it was cut for agriculture or cattle pasture. After the forests of Madagascar, the Atlantic forest is the world's second most endangered vegetation type. An education centre has been built in the Poco das Antas Biological Reserve to help visitors learn about the forest, and the program works intensively in local communities with remaining forest fragments. The local community has become involved in protecting its unique tamarins and the forest they need to live in. Once, the lowland Atlantic forest in the state of Rio de Janeiro covered an area about the size of Egypt. Now, less than 2% remains. Local farmer Luis Nelson is developing protected corridors of forest through his land. He believes it is important to act towards a better future for the next generation. Nelson gets help from non-government organisations, but he feels a responsibility to make a practical contribution to the forest. Replanting programs are in place to bring the forest back to areas where it has been cleared for agriculture. Around the world, 140 zoos are also involved with the Brazilian government in a joint captive breeding program. Golden lion tamarins born in these zoos will be sent to Brazil to be released into their natural forest habitat.